Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Borderlands 4. With the new patch, Rafa got a host of buffs from melee and even its lance. Where does that leave us? Well, I covered the melee build quite a while back, and at the time it was heavily relying on the Groundbreaker bug. That bug uses the specialization node to kind of infinitely stack kinetic melee damage, scaling the output of the build the longer the fight goes on to ridiculous levels. That, combined with many different damage stacking concepts, then works for a melee build very well, resulting in a super strong build that just requires a bit of charge up time. It doesn't need as much Groundbreaker charge up time based on the target like general mobbing, but when it does, it can. Now, most of the buffs that happened were relevant to the build, giving us, say, 2% increased damage per point in a skill node, going from like 7 to 9% in a lot of cases. But because the Groundbreaker bug is still there, we have to be thankful for that. Here's the current build post-patch working exactly the same as what we were just looking at. The reality is that it's just slightly stronger. It amps up a little faster, and yet it still relies on the Groundbreaker bug to do its thing. Because if we drop Groundbreaker, here we can see the difference. It's not even comparable output. Where Groundbreaker takes a bit to get going, you can tell when it's supposed to hit that it just doesn't. So it's certainly better than what it was, but it's still a build that heavily relies on a bug to do with Groundbreaker. So for now, that's my conclusion on it. However, back when we covered the melee build, we were testing some crazy concepts with this Slippy grenade. This monstrous thing scales its damage based on your melee damage thanks to its special Swordfish passive. And because there's a ton of synergy between melee and Ordinance builds, we were trying it out back when we were looking at the melee build. The problem then was you'd be spawning grenades at your feet for a stacking damage amp. If you had a proper grenade rather than a low level weak one, you'd damage yourself so much you'd die. Now combine that with the Slippy grenade and it, as you can see, was instant death on yourself the moment you tried to attack. But what if we could harness this concept from a safer distance in a different way? There was obviously something there. Cut to now with the many different melee buffs, and now this thing is really on the table. So let's take a look at a bunch of different bosses and how I'm dealing with them. As you can see, it's insane. Basically what's happening is I'm buffing up with the character skill. That is enhancing my Ordinance damage through a ton of stacking through melee and gun damage. That's all being piled into the grenades. On reactivation of the class skill, we're dropping a little turret that fires the copy of my own grenades. So I'm spawning them from that, I'm throwing my own, and each time we send one, it doubles. They bounce on a location repeatedly, dealing an instance of damage over and over on each bounce. When there's like 10 of them on one location, it's disgusting. Sometimes I'll change weapon to change what element is getting the most benefit on those grenades, based on the target and what its weaknesses are. But from the variety of targets that I've shown here, you can see that we can deal with any damage type and just deal such ridiculous output. It was already good before this patch, now it's even better. So if you want to give this build a try, here are the key points that you're going to need to actually run it. Firstly, obviously, we have the Slippy grenade. Be aware that this comes with Swordfish, that's the whole melee damage on detonation thing to scale it, but it is important to be aware of the mods. Because where I have Nuke, we have grenade damage is increased and radius is increased. But then the cooldown's affected by that. So we do try to manage our cooldowns based on this fact. But other mods can exist, like a mod with knockback, which would be very bad. The dangerous part of this grenade is its radius though, and if you increase its radius and splash damage and splash radius, you are ultimately risking it killing you, because if this thing touches you, you're done, you're down. What's funny about this though is in single target you don't have to worry about that, you just carefully place them and think about that fact. The fight's over so quick it's fine. Meanwhile, when it comes to mobbing, while the mob clear is obviously insane for everything that's affected by this, you're definitely playing a bit of a game of cat and mouse with your own grenades, and all of the grenades that are spawning, by the way, everywhere. Everything you look at is going to be dead instantly, but obviously you got to watch for your explosions. Honestly, you absolutely can in mob clear just brain off, throw the grenades in the best locations to take out the most targets, and then just let the second wind instantly revive you every time anyway. But to be fair, I do think it's fun to spawn them everywhere, and yet try to dodge them taking you down. Other key aspects of this build are to do with Ordinance damage and scaling in different ways, like giving it a chance to critical hit, scaling Ordinance damage from gun damage. We know that the Slippy grenade gets melee damage bonuses for its damage, so melee damage scaling from gun damage makes that even stronger. With a simple class mod, the Grenade Zerker, whenever you throw a grenade, you get to throw an extra one. Lastly, with the correct weapon in hand, you change the grenade's element, so again we manage that based on the weakness of the target. But yeah, that's the key aspects of the build. Mainly the class mod and the Slippy grenade kind of get this going, and everything else enhances it. You can do it in a lot of different setups. But let's cover my setup and why. We commit both to the melee tree, the arc knives tree, and of course the Peacebreaker cannons tree for quite a few reasons. Let's start with the Peacebreaker cannons just because there's important things to talk about here. Firstly, we increase our gun damage, which we know goes into our ordnance damage thanks to the specializations. And whenever we critically hit with those now potentially critting grenades, our action skill duration is restored, keeping it going, which is great. With the remaining 5 points, we increase our damage based on our shield capacity, and just 2 points into see you here. So when we kill enemies, we restore shield to help with our concept. That gets us down to the all-important Augment here, which is battle system. It takes your character skill and means that it starts to deal ordnance damage, scaling off us, which is great. But it also means Rafa starts to deal increased ordnance damage. Then, when you press F to drop the cannon, it becomes a turret that fires occasional grenades as well. And that grenade is copying yours. So, very deadly. Down here with the remaining 5 points, we go Confetti. Rafa's ordinances deal bonus damage in his gun's current element. So that's why we're swapping guns and thinking about the element and weakness of the target. So that's the point spent. With the remaining 29, we go to the Arc Knives tree. We take Handshake Deal for the gun damage and melee damage for obvious reasons. We take Diamond Hands here just to get the most value. When you're dealing melee damage, you can increase your gun damage. We have Hard Sell. Whenever your shields do break, you gain a portion of that shield's max capacity as overshield, keeping you alive. This ties into the shield we're using, What's for Dinner, because overshield gives us shock damage. Coming down into the military, we're taking up the ordnance cooldown rate for obvious reasons. We're committing to booming business here. Whenever you critically hit an enemy, you have a chance to spawn free grenades. So with the fact that our grenades can crit, they may generate more grenades on themselves, which is ridiculous potential. And finally down here, we use our 3 points to make it so whenever we deal ordnance damage, you also deal increased gun damage and melee damage, and that stacks up to 10. So as you drop grenades, every instance of damage is building this, and then the more gun damage and melee damage you have, the more your grenades do. With our last point, we just drop it here for slightly increased splash damage, and then giving that splash damage some critical hit chance, further helping the potential of grenade crits. Here's a quick overview of the specialization. You want Gadgeteer and you want to get down to Fragmentation Payload, so you initially need to put 10 points in Survivor and Brute so you can reach Gadgeteer. Then you put 20 points into Gadgeteer. So that gets you here, giving your Ordnance that chance to critically hit, with increased crit damage. On the way down here, we'll also get full Spectrum Arsenal. Ordnance damage now benefits from increases to gun damage. Amazing. The next most important thing you can pick up is this, which is very cheap to do so. 1 point into Runner will get you to Bare Arms. Melee damage now benefits from increases to gun damage. So, more melee damage means more damage with our Ordnance. More gun damage means more damage with our Ordnance. With the next pile of points, I would get 20 in Survivor, just so you can reach the best defense, which is just super good because it increases our damage dealt based on how full our shield and health is. And by putting points into that, you're going to get more health and shield as well. Then with all future points, I'm just dumping them into Gadgeteer to help with the actual cooldown rate of the grenade. Right, now we talk about weapons. You need 4 weapons of 4 different elements. You want one that's going to deal great kinetic damage, one that's going to deal incendiary, one that's going to deal shock, and one that's going to deal corrosive. Then in your hands, you hold the one that's tied to the target you're dealing with. So if I'm dealing with red health, I want fire. If I'm dealing with yellow health, I want corrosive. And if I'm dealing with blue shield health, I want shock. And then when I'm doing general mobbing, I want kinetic because that's going to have a nice balance across all of them, and I don't have to worry about matching against weak targets that die instantly anyway. In my case of that kinetic weapon, I do recommend Hot Slugger because as you kill while it's in your hands, you get all those damage buffs stacking up to 3 times. That's 90% increased damage for each shot that you're firing here. So it gives you a nice weapon that's great for killing stragglers that didn't get cleaved by all the grenades everywhere. Alternative to that, you could have like a sniper rifle with a special mod for an underbarrel. It causes this marker that you fire at a target. For 8 seconds, they take increased damage, 35% more. Nice for single target. If for some reason you feel like you need more single target in this ridiculous build that cleans single targets super well. But yeah, the other guns don't matter. You'll never actually directly use them. It's just really for the element, so whatever works for you. Next, obviously, we have the grenade, which is Slippy. In my case, I've got the atomic version with the nuke. Again, there are plenty of versions of the mods you could get here, but do not run one with knockback because it literally backfires for the concept of the build. Otherwise, plenty of things will work, but nuke is kind of the goal because it increases your grenade damage. The scary part is the radius because it can catch you, right? But as long as you're aware of it and willing to engage with dodging the grenades, it is fantastic. Alright, going left to right for the rest of them though, we have the rep kit. There are two options here. You could consider a rep kit with hard hitter. So for 20 seconds in this case, because I have time dilation, I get a 40% increase to melee damage. And again, don't forget, melee damage goes into ordnance damage. So it's just a damage amp for a grenade that's super potent. Popping this before I drop all my grenades on a boss is ultra strong. However, if you're doing mob clear, you probably want the cooldown rate more than that. So be aware of this mod, Go-Go Gadget. On use, grants increased ordnance cooldown rate by 50%. So I would strongly recommend this for mob clear so that you're able to get the grenades back and actually throw them as much as possible. This combined with something like Heart Pump would be ideal though. 3 charges of the rep kit means you'd be able to constantly spam that Go-Go Gadget effect, basically never having cooldowns on your grenades, which would be ideal again for mob clear. Compared to the actual damage amp of hard hitter, they won't hit as hard, but in mob clear when things die anyway, it is a better idea to have it available as much as you need to spam grenade. Next up we have the class mod. So you need the Grenazerker, it's very important. It means when you throw a grenade, you get an additional grenade, it doubles your damage. With this you want any damage lines that are going to increase your output, so gun damage, melee damage, obvious. But also ordnance damage and any ordnance cooldown, character skill cooldown, that'd be great too. The mods you're looking for, I don't have the perfect setup. Confetti is fantastic, but there is a green skill that I would love to have some levels on that I just don't have right now. So Artilleria would be great because the ordnance cooldown, or this one because we're going to stack our damage like crazy. Having more levels would increase the stacking of that damage. The thing that I do have levels in that you definitely want though is Confetti, because it's going to mean your grenades are dealing more damage and more element damage based on the weapon you're holding. So Confetti, Artilleria, and Synergia, these will be the 3 that you'd be looking for. For the shield, we have What's for Dinner. When Energy Shield is active, enemies have a chance to drop Overshield when hit. When Overshield is also active, you get 25% shock damage. Why not? Plus in this case we have Amp for more gun damage potential, which feeds into the build. And again through the skill tree we have Overshield potential to feed into the shock damage benefit. Lastly, the awkward nature of enhancements with melee or grenade builds. The problem with enhancements is that it's going to increase the output and benefits of the weapon. And we're not using our weapon pretty much ever. We're using grenades, so we want to increase the grenade damage. It's the same issue with melee builds, they don't have any benefits from enhancements. So really all you care about is the lines here, like gun damage, ordnance damage, melee damage, splash damage, and then ordnance cooldown, character skill cooldown. That's what you'd be looking for because the enhancements don't actually do anything for us, which really sucks. Lastly, we have the firmware. For me, I go for 2 Gadget Ahoy. This helps with our Ordnance CDR, which is very important, and then the damage at level 2. Yes, at level 3, you get a damage buff for 15 seconds. Great from mob clear, but everything's dying instantly anyway. There are other benefits we can get, like 2 levels in Real Big Fist. Melee damage increase multiple times, that feeds into our Ordnance damage. Speaking of which, with 1 level on Action Fist, we get a little bit more melee damage, which again feeds into our ordnance damage. Other options you might have would be things like Airstrike and Get Throwing. These lead to splash damage increases, which of course will increase your output too. But a build that's already deadly to yourself, things that may increase radius of the damage you're trying to avoid, could be a very risky thing. So I'm pretty happy with this firmware setup. When it comes to the quick gameplay guide, it's pretty straightforward. You activate your class action, and then based on the rep kit, you damage amp if you've got the heavy hitter one like me, or you use that to bring your grenade cooldown back if you've got the other option of Go-Go Gadget. Either way, you drop the grenade turret by activating the action skill again, plopping it down next to your ideal target, especially if that's a single target. Then you reactivate the skill to put it back on your back and replace it again if you ever need to. But yeah, while you're going, just get throwing grenades and try to maximize their location. Against a single target, make sure they're popping right by its feet for the whole fight. In mob clear, you try to spread them out so that enemies are dying the moment they spawn in on where a grenade was placed earlier. Remember, the crits can spawn more, and your grenade turret will be firing them off. Don't forget, in single target against a proper boss, swap your gun based on the target's main health bar currently. So corrosive for yellow, shock for blue shields, incendiary for raw red health, and I just swap guns based on what I'm currently dealing with. But yeah, there you have it. That's our ridiculous fish melee grenade build, dropping bouncing nukes on your targets, watching them evaporate, made now even stronger thanks to the big melee buffs. in this patch. Give it a go if you like, and if you enjoyed the build concept, do drop a like. But until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.